I went broke 3 times. I just, because it was self-funded, either gonna make it, you either not. I mean, I just sort of collapsed. The main thing that kept me going, I just had to make a choice. You think about giving up, and that's the point where nearly everyone gives up. You know, the businesses fail. I just made the decision to go that extra couple of millimeters.
Welcome to Integration, Strategies in Business for a World in Flux, where we explore the art of moving forward, not just sustaining, transforming. I'm your host, Samantha Jewel, and I hope you are as inspired by my guests as I am. They come from many different walks of life. The great ones among us do not see setbacks, only the landscape of possibilities. My guests have learned to navigate what is, to find ways to keep going and leave the world better than they found it, so that when the storm comes, they don't just endure, they lean into it. And on that note, I hope you enjoy my guest today. Welcome, Khory. So Khory and I have had a cyber communication, a cyber relationship, because we're both in the same area of regenerative agriculture. And I've always really admired Khory's posts. He's always doing very, I suppose, expansive is the word I would use for the way Khory addresses things. Apart from being obviously a poster boy for Regen Ag, he's also really addressing that big landscape aspect, which is, I think, the really critical thing that people maybe underestimate. You see a lot of posts around the internet about small sort of hobby farm style focus, which is great. Nothing wrong with that at all. But because I come from a big, wide open country and I'm very aware of the potential of land to actually sequester carbon, increase biodiversity, I really love working and talking to people that have been doing big projects. And that is really the hallmark of Khory's focus. So with that in mind, I will say welcome, Khory. Lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me, and it's good to finally chat in person. Been commenting back and forwards on LinkedIn a little bit over the last couple of years, but never in person. So I'll try and explain the best that I can where I'm coming from, and let's have a informative conversation for you.
Yeah. So now, first of all, I'm going to ask you, what got you into regenerative agriculture and took you down this path?
I originally come from a 30,000 acre cattle station in central Queensland near Carnarvon Gorge there.
Great.
We're running cattle, and not many, 500, 600 breeders sort of maximum. Dad ran a lot of ecotourism, rehabilitation programs for disadvantaged youth, etc. He had that sort of a holistic way to think of diverse income streams, which is kind of where I got that passion, I guess, for it was a very fragile country. It was very biodiverse, full of biodiversity, very beautiful country to look at. How it all had to be managed very carefully and you couldn't overstop. So I learned from a young age about that fragility interaction between humans and productivity, economy, essentially. So I naturally went on to study environmental science at university, and then a now spanning 15-year environmental career across a number of different industries, mainly mining, land rehabilitation. And the last 4 years, I built my own company in carbon credits, large scale carbon regeneration, forest regeneration, mainly across cattle stations under the clean energy regulator, human-induced regeneration method. I signed 10 cattle stations in Queensland and Western New South Wales before the method expired. And now, very interestingly enough, we're in this limbo period in carbon where we're looking to go, well, the government's looking to expand into an integrated farmland management method, which sort of is that sort of holistic viewpoint. So I guess the posts on social media that you're talking about, LinkedIn in particular, and my Facebook page, I've sort of tended to focus on, yes, what you say, that large scale regeneration, kiss the ground and all that good work that these directors and Hollywood actors are sort of doing in that space now. It does focus on small scale soil in particular. And I sort of am looking at the whole of ecosystem practices and integration, the effective integration of both people and agricultural systems, particularly livestock, particularly cattle. They're large herbivores. We've always had large herbivores on this planet. It's not the cattle that are the issue mainly. It's the way that we're managing them. So I try and communicate effectively about that, and not just the environmental strategies in particular. We sort of know the strategies. We know this. It's more of the mindset shift. I know you may have noticed in some of my posts, I talk about the psychological element of interaction and the integration of people into nature and into these systems. That is, according to Charles Massey, he was the first one who sort of started talking about this as the fifth element of biological and ecosystem regeneration. It is us. That's the fifth principle, the fifth element of regeneration is our psychological input, our paradigm shift, our mindset shift that we need to place into these systems to make sure that these ecosystems flourish and regenerate to their full potential. So I guess I've tried to focus on that last 4 years or so.
I think it's really good that you bring that up because I feel sometimes the narrative, I suppose it's primarily coming out of America, but we do get in Australia as well, this kind of humans are the blight on the earth focus rather than we are also part of the animal ecosystem. And who's to say that nature doesn't have a plan for us as part of that animal system? And we're still expanding and flourishing like all species do. And if you look, let's say, I think historically you look at animals and everyone's always worried about extinctions, which is relevant, but they do that. I mean, we've had animals come and go for various periods of time. And I think our intelligence does lend us to, I mean, I feel we've gone through this big like hyper expansion period, and then our intelligence has lent us to start to realize, oh, actually we're destroying everything around us, which most species do. They'll destroy, I mean, look at a cicada, they destroy their food source until they drop dead. So we're trying to work on how we can modulate our behavior so we don't destroy the environment at the same time. So that's kind of where you're at. You're at that heading point of that, which I too have been in that focus for a long time. So I recognize it in a fellow traveler.
Yes, and you're absolutely right. I mean, nature, well, everything that I've learned in this environmental science journey is that nature just doesn't make mistakes. We are, as humans, not a mistake in this world, and we have to co-evolve. Everything co-evolves and co-regulates with each other in sync, not in sync necessarily. If one happens to one thing, the other thing will negotiate and compromise, and they'll sort of effectively integrate and then evolve together. And that's what I'm talking about, is humans need to work out where we fit into this system, because we are there to somewhat manage it effectively. And we haven't yet sort of worked that out, I don't believe, but regenerative agriculture is one of those pathways that we can sort of get in sync with the environment. We could set up systems and a framework that allows nature to thrive. As long as you set up those frameworks and principles of regeneration, it'll start to co-evolve and naturally work together. Nature will do the rest. So I believe that humans are part of the answer to climate change and all these challenges, sort of bigger picture challenges that we're talking about, is that our hearts and our own minds alive together in sync with nature somewhat is part of that answer. That's one of my strong messages these days, especially on social media. I think that we need to be talking more about it and more effective ways to communicate that, because it's a complex topic, right? And it's a hard concept to grasp a lot of the time. But there are some examples that we can talk about along the way. But it is a difficult concept to grasp, and there isn't much conversation yet around this in particular.
Well, let's throw a little one out there. Take the ravens on the highway, or crows, depends on which species you're looking at, I suppose. The way they have, I mean, I drive up and down a piece of highway all the time to my own farm, and I see these guys, and they've just totally adapted to the road and the cars, and they've got their timing perfect. They swoop in and out of that 110 kilometers, and they pick up the roadkill on the roads. And they just do so well with it. And the more you study that, they've adapted to us. And I've seen instances in England where the birds will stand and wait for someone to press the button and walk across the road with them. And there's just all these sort of really interesting things of that point you're saying about the way we're evolving, co-evolving. And I think bringing those little examples in is sometimes a good idea to highlight how much nature is working with us in the wild, particularly.
Yeah, and another one, just quickly, dingoes in particular. There's a big mindset around agriculture, livestock producers, particularly sheep producers in Australia, around baiting dingoes and making sure their numbers are down. Whereas the scientific studies, a number of case studies across Australia now, suggesting that is anti what we should be doing, and it's actually having the opposite effect to what we should be, because dingoes are herd animals, they're pack animals, right? And they don't necessarily, their preferred prey is the kangaroo, the native wildlife that they've grown up on for however long they've been here. I think there's evidence 16,000 years, potentially 20,000 years maybe for dingoes. I'm not exactly sure when they came across. It was a little bit later than Aboriginals, but they've evolved on their native prey, and they don't necessarily want to go for cattle and sheep. So when they work in packs, Obviously, wallabies and kangaroos are harder to take down, so they work in packs and they coordinate to take these kangaroos, these fast kangaroos and wallabies down. Now, the easier prey, when their numbers are reduced and they're only working in ones and twos, are the sheep and the cattle. So they are more prone to attack cattle and sheep. This is scientifically correct, and in the case studies that have been shown now, to attack the easier prey like cattle and sheep rather than go for their preferred prey. And then these kangaroo numbers just
Explode.
they're throwing the whole environment out. And so that's a mindset shift. We're going from livestock producers that really want these dingo numbers down and baiting and saying that we need to get rid of them because they're killing our sheep and cattle. And I understand that side. I mean, I've seen that side. I understand that they can use sheep as, game, just hunting game, and just murder flocks of them, in a couple of weeks kind of thing. There is a mindset shift that we need to lean towards to be able to put nature back in sync again. And
there's another point that you might find interesting is I had an old farmer who came from a conventional herding background, and he had a dingo going crazy and killing lots of his sheep, and he just was going crazy with it. And then what he learned was that the farmers were killing the female dingo, the mother, and what was happening is the cubs were not being taught that they have the way their behavioral system is, the mother actually teaches them to hunt. And because they were killing the mother in the early process, they were like these rogue teenagers going crazy because they weren't being put in line by their parents effectively, or by the mother that trains them. And he saw that after a period of time, and this one dingo that he caught or killed was a rogue teenage dingo. It was that like it had gone crazy is more my point, that they need that social interaction of their herd, what you're saying, for that development to work so they don't also go crazy like that.
Yeah, so what we're talking about essentially, and these are one of the principles or the methods of regenerative agriculture, as you know, is that all this stuff, all these examples we're using right now, is that we're looking to nature for agricultural or human solutions. We're looking to mimic nature. We're looking to see what happens in nature naturally over the thousands of years that has been co-evolved. Nature's been, here for billions of years before us, and it's co-evolved in that sense. So we're looking to nature for solutions and applying them to agriculture and human solutions so that it can benefit us as well. And that's the psychological mindset shift we've been taught from. You'll hear this a number of times. I know you would have. I'm a third, fourth generational farmer. My father did it this way, and now I'm doing it this way. That's the type of stuff we have to challenge and say, well, what is that the right way to do it? Should we look to another solution? Should we look to another way? And it's about opening up and challenging yourself, your own ego, and asking yourself and others questions, becoming curious, and especially curious about what happens in nature. Because I guarantee that you will find, if you look to nature for answers, Albert Einstein said this, by the way, the smartest man in the world, and he said, if you look to nature for solutions, you will often find the answer. That's what regenerative agriculture is all about, essentially, is just finding alternative ways to do things that are more aligned with nature and essentially with people in general and livestock.
So let me ask you, getting back to those 10 cattle stations. First of all, let's give our viewers a bit of an idea of how big those cattle stations were so we get some idea of landscape size.
I merged with the company last year who have a lot of cattle stations in Western Australia, South Australia, and Territory, and they told me that these cattle stations are small. For a Queensland myself, they're actually pretty low. We didn't have a cattle station less than 30,000 hectares, I think. They range from 25,000 to 50, 60,000 hectares, I think they range from. So we're talking about large scale. For me, that's large scale. Large scale forest regeneration, what we're trying to achieve, using different cattle management methods, making sure that the fire's managed essentially, the soil, paddocks are rested, there's more water points put in everywhere to spread that grazing pressure, more fencing infrastructure so you can manage the cattle more effectively, plan grazing, to allow that forest to grow and the biodiversity to increase. So those, again, managing cattle the way in which the natural herbivores used to graze, like the bison, the elephants, the giraffes. We are mimicking essentially what happens in natural cattle grazing herds all across the world over the last, 2 to 6 million years. So we're just putting that planning infrastructure in place, and that's what happens for a 25-year period. You calculate the amount of carbon that can be sequestered in that forest and in the soil, and then you trade those credits as a profit on the market. So yes, I've recently merged with another large carbon project developer company and sold that company. So I'm now in a different stage of my life where I'm looking to what next for me. I'm not too sure.
Okay, so I'm just going to keep finishing up on the 10 cattle stations. What was the critical thing that you found to getting their mindset to change? Because I hear this discussion everywhere. Was it money? Was it the carbon credit value? Was it something that they were just getting to their wits' end? But what do you think was the turning point, or was it different?
This is interesting too. There's often a couple of ways that people change, right? We have the amygdala in the back of our head, which is the walnut size a bit of our brain that is the survival bit. It's a 2 million-year-old sort of reptilian part of our brain that teaches us the fight, flight, or freeze sort of thing. It's survival instincts. First of all, the first way that we generally change is through something big, a shift, like health scare. There might be a big natural disaster that shakes us up. Like it's a reaction. So we are used to running away from saber-toothed tigers, right? And that's the amygdala saying, run, fear, in a fight. So that's the first way that we generally change is something big happens in our lives and then we get a shake up and we're like, shit, we need to do something about this right now. We don't really have that many threats besides climate change sort of jolting us and occasional health scare that people get. So there are some ways that I've seen that people change from health scares and they think, well, we need an alternative income here. The cattle aren't generally helping. The cattle price goes up and down. We're going through droughts, etc. I've had a couple of people come to me and say, yeah, I've had a health scare. I'm looking for alternative streams to look after my kids or whatever. The second way is generally more so is where it's a very slow cultural shift. I mean, look how long it took us to get to a simple yes or no answer with gay marriage. It was legitimately about 10 years that Australia took to change that culture from a no to a yes.
Or even to consider it.
Even to consider it, right? And that's years and years of conversations and talk and in the politics and the media. So that's a very slow culture. We generally just slowly shift. We actually don't have that time in carbon. Like I'm building a business. So I've got a limited amount of money to build that business with. I funded it personally myself. So I have a limited amount of time. So generally speaking, it just is the money. You come along with these carbon estimates. So you can earn this much over 25 years. We won't charge you anything for it up front. Once we produce the ACCUs, we'll take a percentage of that.
And from that first conversation to you generating income, what sort of length of time was that you had to wait?
A fairly lengthy period of time, 2 to 3 years generally, to try and get the carbon credits produced. Because we have to develop the project, sometimes get native title passed on it. There's a number of different hoops that you have to jump through. It's pretty highly regulated sort of industry. So there's a bit of a waiting period, but the ACCUs the carbon credits are accruing over that whole time. So you get your first payday is generally a pretty good one because it's been accrued over 2 to 3 years. But yeah, look, so if you're patient and you don't have to pay us in that period, then you'll get a bit of a payday there. So generally speaking, yeah, if it's not a health scare or something big in their lives, it'll be the money to start with because we don't have the time for that slow cultural shift to develop the mindset, the paradigm shift.
And what is a sort of a general age group of the farmers that you did get success with?
Anywhere from 40 through till 60, I would say. That's sort of mid-age where they've, they're couples generally and a few kids and working out what to do with the country there. It's getting quite tough with cattle in some of those areas. Like I was in North Queensland there, in the Gulf of Carpentaria and in Western Queensland, Western New South Wales. Some of these areas are getting pretty tough to run livestock in. So they're looking for alternatives and income uses over that next generation. And that's what I'd say that's what they're generally using the carbon for, is just like a steady income stream so that they can keep on running cattle at the same time, which is what carbon allows you to do.
Yeah. I find the whole discussion in this space, because I've been looking at the carbon for trading, obviously, myself for quite some time. And I found, maybe it's more Victorian, but it was the attitude, particularly in the sort of more 60-year-old plus area, was we don't trust the government. We don't know that they'll maintain what they've said. And we actually had a number of farmers that had gone onto the carbon projects very early, and now they've changed that model 2 or 3 times, and they were disallowing it because they hadn't measured to 100 centimeters. They'd only measured to 70 or something. I was like, well, wait a minute. Like they weren't honouring previous contracts, the government. That kind of thing is the problem for farmers, is my observation, in terms of their reticence to want to come on board with it. So did you have much of that, or get around?
Yeah, massively so. Because there are the estimates that you sign people up on, right? The carbon estimates, and they're just estimates. You come along and you do the best job you can with the money you've got. Obviously, you can't go and measure each tree in the field and do all the 3D imagery modeling and the ecological assessments and stuff, because it costs so much. So you have to do what's called a carbon model estimate using the government full cam, is what it's referred to, which it just pumps out, based on satellite imagery and carbon sort of calculations, it pumps out an estimate of how much, if you do X, Y, and Z, and that forest reaches its full potential over 20, you can potentially earn this much based on what the carbon dollar is based on now, what the $35 a carbon credit is currently. So that's just an estimate. However, everyone, both myself as the business owner and the landowner, is signing up on that risk that, yes, it could be worth that much if everything goes right. If things don't go right, if you get a drought, bushfire, flood, or yes, the government might change the goalpost. You don't know what they're going to do. Everything in business is a risk, right? And you sign up on that risk. And so, yes, when you get out in the paddock, sometimes trees aren't sequestering as much carbon as what we thought they were, or the soil type's different, or something's changed, and those estimates get reduced. And some of those cases, especially historically, have been dramatically reduced. So there's a lot of angry landholders out there that are both confused, because it's a complicated world. A long time to understand it myself. So I do not blame anyone that doesn't understand it, because I'm in this world every day, and there's a big separation between the carbon project developer, like myself, or what I was, and the landowner, because the landowner's just out in the paddock every day, building fences, doing what they do, and they just think that we're sitting here in Gold Coast or Sydney, wherever we are, and not doing
crunching numbers.
Yeah, we're just working behind the desk every day, trying to get funding, trying to do this, trying to pass all these jump through all these hoops that the government sets to get us through. So we're working our guts out, but there's a big gap. There's that the landholder just doesn't see that. I myself, I'm guilty of not communicating well enough with landholders back what we were doing. We were trying to work on a bit of a transparency app. So they have the app there where they can see exactly where the project is up to and all the information that's there. But just the technology hasn't quite got there just yet. And so there is that big communication gap sometimes. And I'm guilty of it myself. It just, you're running around doing different things at once. You can't talk through this stuff constantly with people sometimes, and there ends up being a gap in knowledge of this stuff and where people are at and why the estimates have come down potentially. And it's no one's fault. It's just that the industry is young, reasonably young, 15, 20 years old, and we need to get better at that. We need to get better at transparency. And
also, you're asking the farmer, even though you say it's not going to cost them anything, if they have to put in fences and water and change protocols and do all those sort of things, that's often huge money on those 30 or 50,000 hectare properties. So there is quite a bit of, some of the projects I've seen have been massive infrastructure upgrades to be able to do them. I don't know the projects that you're working on, whether it was like that, but I would say they're also wearing that cost. I would have thought it actually improves their farm anyway, so it's not such a burden for the cost, but I would imagine confronting that cost is probably more the issue, is getting them over the line to actually invest in their farm to do that.
Yeah, that's a good point. However, you stage the planning out that. I was sort of working on, yourself with regenerative agriculture. You don't do everything up front unless you have the capital, and there's no capital up front to do this stuff. That's where the So you just need to change your management, sort of staging, as in, you change your management. It could be a couple of things that are quite minimal, but significant enough to induce that regeneration and day dot. And you stage it. Year 1, you do this. Year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. So you have a staged plan so that the carbon credits can start coming in year 2, year 3, and can start funding that. So I was staging it. Like the landholders that I have wouldn't ever spend that much money up front because they don't have that kind of capital. I don't take on that huge amount of risk. The point of the model that I was building was that the carbon project developer takes on that risk, the majority of the costs, which we did. It was a 400,000, $500,000 per property to do all the LiDAR. It's called LiDAR. We fly drones or light planes over the property to get the 3D imagery modeling. Then you have to analyze that and do all the on the ground, etc. Like, it's a lot of money up front for the project developer.
And how did you afford that? How did you raise the money to do that per farm?
Yeah, well, I had investors on board eventually. So I built the company myself to the stage where I signed and got the project approved. And then we did some capital raising to get that money in. Yeah. And then I had some good partners as well.
Well done on doing that, by the way. As someone who's done a lot of working on capital raising, it's not an easy thing to do. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah. It was for the last 4 years of my life been an absolute roller coaster. And I don't think I'd ever put myself through it again, to be honest. It was heartbreaking at times. A lot of times where I was crying on the kitchen floor, and even recently, some of these estimates have come down. I've lost a lot of money, and holders have felt like they have, still a lot as well. All of us are still going to do really well. And it's disappointing is that when you have one estimate and it comes down somewhat. Yeah, for me, that was something I found very difficult to get over, because my two things with starting this company was high positive impact for both the landholder and the world in general, like regeneration, obviously helping climate change be a problem, and then make it profitable to not, so that we don't have to have a slow cultural shift, because we don't actually have that time anymore to have that slow cultural shift with climate change. It's coming on now. So we need to make it high profit so people jump on board very quickly and make it scaled very quickly. And I felt slightly disappointed that, if I can't do it with a 50,000 hectare cattle station, which we can still, just not as enticing as what we originally thought. It was one of those things that I had to sort of work out within myself, get over that. So, the last 4 months.
And cover your costs.
Yeah.
Your outstanding debt and your investors all giving you a hard time. I mean, all those things are full on.
Yeah. All of that stuff was part of the entrepreneurial journey in any industry, right? It's not just carbon, it's anything. But you go through that, and that's fine. And carbon's going to be, it's locked in for 25 years. We've got a long time to work this out. Right? Tree planting can come into it. The new integrated method can come into it. There's a new fire management method that can come into it. There's a number of different things that still give us enormous hope to start building that profit back up. And everyone's going to do great out of it, especially if the carbon price goes up. It's just, it does need to be enticing for people to jump on board, and everyone jump on board very quickly, which I believe it's a really good thing for every livestock producer to start looking at now more seriously, especially when this integrated method comes on board. But I believe that the carbon estimates that we put up front need to get better. We need to work out how to do that better to begin with.
Did you do any soil work or only trees? Was that your focus?
No, only vegetation. Yeah, trees, just for the fact that it's...
Because you're using LiDAR and it's easier to measure from above rather than doing soil cores.
Also, there's more money in them too, and the full cab takes into account the soil as well, and that's where I think the integrated method will really come on board, is where you can add soil into it now. On its own is slightly financially risky, and I just think that going back to that holistic perspective, it's not, everyone says, well, it's seaweed that's going to save the world, or it's trees, or it's soil.
It's never one, yeah.
Everything in together, right? And so this is what I hope that this integrated method will present, is a more holistic way to look at carbon, to look at ecosystems and livestock in amongst it. Cattle grazing are absolutely part of that. And there's been a lot of talk that don't know if cattle grazing is going to be allowed in this integrated method. And I think it's absolutely ludicrous that we are even considering livestock, especially in those North Queensland areas where they can reduce, livestock managed well can reduce the intensity of fires, and therefore
Absolutely.
therefore increase carbon and biodiversity, longer term permanence levels. It is absolutely crazy that the government or anyone else is talking about getting rid of cattle grazing out of these carbon methods.
Probably means that there's some very strong lobbyists working with the politicians who know nothing about agriculture or the way the landscape works, saying those things. So it's very difficult when you see all that stuff. I have been listening to. Have you ever heard of Jonathan Ludgren over in America?
Yes, I have that. Yeah, yeah.
He's an entomologist, a bug person. And like, it doesn't really, I always say it doesn't matter if you look at soil, if you look at water, if you look at vegetation, all of them work together. And he works on bugs and shows how the bugs are the indicator for all of those things as well. So, I happened to have the pleasure of meeting him at a conference in Kansas back in 2016 on Gail Fuller's farm with Gabe Brown and Christine Jones and all those guys were there. Such enthusiasm because he'd come out of the PhD area and was working pretty much like a maverick scientist. And so he was sort of like the curbs were off and he was so excited about the insects and what they all did. And I think that it's really critical to understand how important it is for whichever angle you're working at. Like you are working at trees. It doesn't matter whether you're working at trees or soil or whatever. It's what will make the money for the farmer to be able to increase all of it because we're so actually reliant on all of those things, no matter which one you're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you and I both know the people in the media that are talking about this right now in a negative way. And it just somehow just needs to stop. I think it's just not helping the industry. It's not helping climate change. It's not helping anything at all. And it's wrong. It is purely wrong. They need to get out in these cattle stations and have a look about what actually happens.
Maybe that's your next job is to become a lobbyist.
Look, I'm not really.
I'm joking. No. It would be a horrible job.
I don't want to get tied up and caught up in that media world anymore. I've been there, done that, and so it can get a bit nasty. I'm interested in doing good work and putting across the messages that are the right ones now. And I just know that cattle are part of the solution. Cattle and people are probably
okay. Let's get back to those moments when you said you were crying on the floor because of the changes in whatever the metrics and those sort of things. Because my podcast is focused primarily on what gets you through, because we all go through these tremendous lows, particularly in the entrepreneurial world, but even as a big corporation, you all go through things that really hit you for a sixer. Tell me, what are the things that sort of buoyed you up and kept you going?
I mean, I went broke 3 times. So just because it was self-funded and there were so many 50-50s, you're either going to make it, you're either not. I mean, I just sort of collapsed. The main thing that kept me going right at those moments was that I just had to make a choice. There were a number of choices that I had to make, 3 times every time I went broke. I was like, well, I can turn back now. I got a full-time job and just forget about it and let it go, or I can keep on going. I just remember listening to a lot of podcasts and entrepreneurs saying, well, it's that point where you think about giving up, and that's the point where nearly everyone gives up. The businesses fail because that person has made that decision to give up. It's too hard. You got to go back. I just made the decision to go that extra couple of millimeters, and they all say this. They say if you decide to go that couple of millimeters extra above what everyone else is willing to do, then you will likely make it. And that's what I did. I just made that decision. I said, I'm going to work this till the last dollar in my bank account because I believe what I'm doing is right. And I still, looking back on my journey now, I still think I took all the right steps. I don't think I made any mistakes in terms of what I had to do. And I still think it's a good thing for the farmers. I still think that I've done a good thing for agriculture. Like in terms of legacy, I'm not arrogant or I don't have a legacy. I need people to talk about me. It's more legacy.
You're too young for that.
I needed to do something that was beyond my ego. I didn't need the company to run with me. I wanted it to run for years without me and no one talk about me. I didn't need to be talked about. I just wanted the projects to run. They're 25-year projects. They're set up. I help them set up. I signed
Right.
those, and then now they're going to run, and now they have a commitment to regenerate those forests and produce healthy livestock, nutritious livestock over the next 25 years. And that is something that I'm really proud of. Yeah. And so that for me was one of the driving factors. I really, truly believed in what I was doing and in the way that I was doing it. And I just said, well, if I have to suffer, a few years of pain here and get it through, I knew it was my one shot to do anything significant in that sense with my life. And I just said, well, this is it. This is the stuff that people talk about. You either going to show who you are in this moment, or you're going to keep on going. Even if I failed, at least I could sit back and say, I gave it a go. Gave it a crack, and luckily it came off, and it'll come off for every landholder. They'll all get something really good out of this if they choose if they keep on going. A carbon credit price goes up. We all need that to happen, but other than that, like it's a very positive. Like I just think carbon agriculture, the way that it's headed in this space is really positive. I can't see anything negative about it at this moment. I think we just need to have conversations like you and I are that are not media fueled and not media ego anger fueled, and we can have these conversations where they go back and forth and go, yeah, there's this challenge and that challenge, and how do we make that work all together? And it's not really happening at the moment because of the media. And because of these one or two individuals that keep on blatantly sort of blasting their ego all in their name, this sort of space where it's not factually correct. And they keep on saying that they're factually correct and scientifically correct, but I've seen it. And I've seen the data, and I've seen how this works, and I see how this impacts community.
Do you want to state them? I don't mind if you state them.
No, I don't. I don't want to get involved. It's not my place to get involved in either. I just think that, we need to start talking about this in a more bold way, and that those individuals know who they are, And I think we just need to come to a place where we either ignore them or we have a conversation where we show the data and we work towards a healthier outcome. Because at the moment, there are no healthy outcomes in this.
Well, I think that the data thing is, I've looked at this for quite some time. There's been data on what you and I are talking about empirically for many years, like 50 years, I would say. But what most people are talking about is scientific data. And the scientific data is always compromised these days because it's funded within the universities by various lobbyists and whatever. But there is now enough data sets, both university and otherwise, literally across the planet now, where it's kind of ridiculous to even need to say we need more data because there's so much data. It's so obvious to anybody who walks out on the land. I find it kind of extraordinary that there's even that discussion still, because it is such blatant lying. But it does seem to be that it's the people that are willing to stand up and say it very loudly that get heard. And so there is a bit of that. We do need to keep being loud about it. That, I like to refer to things like every civilization throughout the history of man has died where civilizations have died because they didn't look after their soil, they didn't look after the land. So it doesn't really matter what your data sets are. If that isn't part of it, then we will fail. That's as simple as it.
Yeah, it needs to be storytelling. You're right. It's not necessarily more data. It's storytelling. It's like the conversations like you and I are having. It needs to change somewhat and needs to be pushed back at some point because there's too much power being held at that political level where it's not now affecting the industry. It's now affecting landholders. Landholders can't sign on to these new carbon methods because they're being delayed because it's being debated whether grazing should be in it or not. That's the main.
So let's take a moment then to talk about what are the positive stories that you can relate, things that have moved you on the land from what you've implemented, from what the farmer who maybe was 6 generations saw happen in front of his eyes. Let's go back to those stories about what you've seen on the land with animals returning or birds or whatever it is that you see that really moved people.
The projects that I ran or signed haven't been going long enough to sort of see those changes. We sort of need 3 or 4 years for regeneration to occur to see those first kind of changes. They're in their second year, a lot of these projects. I haven't seen too much yet, but I have heard stories from multiple other carbon projects under the similar or the same method, that birds have returned, animals have returned, all the water holes have come back and wetlands, etc. The personal one that I had when I first started in this industry a long time ago, some of the first carbon projects and the credits started rolling in, and that big drought that they had in Western Queensland, New South Wales, he was close to suicide, this guy, and had destocked everything under huge financial stress, divorce, etc., everything that you go through in that sense. And he was saying that the carbon credits saved him. They came in, they were an extra source of income, they relieved a lot of stress, which clearly relieved a lot of stress in his marriage and his relationships with everyone around him. So it's not only, and that was sort of the wider community kind of thing at the time too. It sort of put the economy, it was an extra source of income. And then, at these other couple of cattle stations, from the diversity coming back in, like birds, etc., they created these little ecotourism huts, around that. So there was bird watchers coming in from, Brisbane and all over Australia in the end, hiring out. So it was just a constant flow of income streams that had been built off the back of just this one move to carbon under the carbon credits. So I think it's sort of integrate environment, community, and economy all together, which is what sustainability is. There's three pillars: it's environment, community, and economy. If you integrate those three pillars correctly, you've got something sustainable where it can continue on. The path that we're down in agriculture in general at the moment across the entire world is not sustainable. We are destroying soils, destroying forests, ecosystems, which is essentially leading towards the destruction of community as well as economy eventually. So we just don't have the ability to keep on going down that path. We need alternative solutions, and carbon credits is one of those alternative outcomes. And I've seen the slow impacts, positive impacts of those changes over the last 10, 15 years that the industry has been going.
How far north are you in Australia? I don't actually know where you're located.
I'm located in Gold Coast, but the projects that I've got, or did have, up in the Croydon region of the Gulf and Carpentaria there.
Okay. Have you ever heard of the Kachana station?
No.
Okay, you should look it up. It's quite inspiring. The guy there came out, 30 years ago with his young wife, and I think they had the children as babies at that point. And I don't know how they bought the land, but they were from South Africa, and they had this huge tract of land that is a 5-hour walk in. You can only fly in. There's no roads at all. And they lived on the land, and they used the wild cattle that were left over from World War I suppose, that were roaming in the area. And they basically regenerated this massive valley, and they only used ecotourism, which people had to fly in, which is pretty amazing. And what he's done is photographic evidence of it is so inspiring. So it's worth looking up. Kachana, KACHANA-station.com. So it's because it's one of those examples of people just wanting to come and see the nature, because they had so much such proliferation of biodiversity in the area. And I would imagine even within 2 years, certainly the conservationists would be able to observe return of ecology in some of your stations. Maybe not big, obvious stuff for the untrained eye, but it's usually the first thing is like the biological stuff in the soil. And then it's the next tier of biodiversity that layers on top of that is the things that can be observed. I found it quite interesting listening to, have you heard of rootssodeep.org?
Yes, yep.
Yeah. So I went and saw that 3 times while it was touring here in Australia, because it was random reason why I ended up seeing it that many times. But I thought probably the most interesting thing was the conversion of those farmers to go regenerative that had been 6 generations, was the desire to see the return of quail, because they wanted to hunt them, which again is bizarre. You want the birds there so you can shoot them. But that was almost uniform across all of them, was this desire to see the return of birds. And one farm had, I think it was 1 bird or some wildly level of no bird life. And literally across the hedgerow on the farm next door, bordering them, were hundreds. And so this idea, they can obviously fly across the fence, but this concept of understanding how critical the soil is, the soil, the grasses, the insects, the birds, all of that, they're all tied in together. I think that movie shows that so clearly. That's why I say I think even on the farms within 2 years, you would see that there was things happening, and maybe they haven't voiced it because they don't think it's that significant.
Not many, a lot of us are ecologically illiterate, is what Charles Massey will refer to, is we just don't know how to read landscapes well enough. Landholders included. As environmental scientists have studied for 5 years at uni to try and understand those concepts. And then, 15-year long career after that, I still don't know how to read that well. Been brought up as a kid on the farms and watching birds from a young age, and with the Bird Watchers Journal and everything, all these little things, you still are learning to read landscapes, literally. And so we just miss stuff. Like when I go out into the landscape with these landholders, farmers, they're all looking at the grass, because that's what they care about, is how much grass, how much
how long it is,
how biomass you've got. And I'm saying, no, look at the trees, look at the mid-level, look at the forest section. I'm teaching them to read landscapes in a
everything.
entirely different light, right? We just don't know how to do that well enough. So there could be a number of these different stories out here, but we don't know how to understand that at that deeper level, what is actually happening. And so, you're right. We just need to pay more attention and spend more time in nature to be able to get those sort of skill sets.
I will say, though, I also think it's got to do with how busy the farmer is. I was working with a biodynamic farmer. I was building an NFT, so I wanted to be able to take the visual recording and use that in an NFT to commercialize it for them. And honestly, because he was 3 hours away, I couldn't go and physically do it myself. But even didn't matter how many times I reminded him, I couldn't get him to take his phone out of his pocket and record what I saw the very first day I went out there. The bird song, the level of different birds that were there, because he had trees around every paddock. When they'd first got there 40 years ago, they had hand planted 25,000 trees with whatever. Like now he'd said I would have chosen different species had I known, but they knew nothing. Their land compared to everybody else's, he had 10x the carbon in the ground because what they did. I mean, they had a dairy farm right next to him. They're both flood irrigation, dry land area. It was really, really apparent that those trees had a big impact, and obviously the methodology that he was using on the land. But they just don't have time. They just don't pull the phone out. They can't do because we're interested in it. We're looking at it. That's why I think it's something like involving bird watchers, but then they've got all these insurance issues and stuff while they can't do it.
Yeah. I think it's not necessarily about time. I think you make time for the priorities you have. I think there's, like, going back to the start about curiosity, you have to be curious about yourself and about this aspect of it and challenge your own business goals and ideas. And am I doing the right thing? And how can I do something different? You make time for that, right? It's probably like, I grew up on a cattle station. I've been around these guys a lot. It's one of the best lifestyle jobs that you can have, right? And because that's why a lot of people do it. Yes, it's very tough at times when times are tough, but all jobs are in the end. Like, I've been through hell and back to build my company for the last 4 years, and it's a different type of work. So I think when we say about farmers and landowners that it's so tough and they don't have time, we will make the time for the things that are priority in our lives and the things that we are curious about and that we want to learn about and that we want to change within ourselves and others. So I think we just need to get more curious in general, because one job is not above the other. We're all equal in the end. A cleaner is just as important as the CEO in my eyes, and we need to understand those different levels and how we all fit in together in community and society. And that's where we need to head, I think, and that's where agriculture needs to head, is just get curious about this stuff.
But do you think that is still a personality type? I mean, you're saying we need to do that, but I feel it's difficult to get people out of their heads in a set mindset to look at those things. And I would agree with you in terms of value of jobs, but getting an individual to change the way they are. I mean, I have people say, "Oh, you're so courageous," and I go, "I am." Like, it's just what I'm made of from birth. I didn't get turned into that or make a conscious effort to be like that. I just am what I am. And I think that that's the same of other people. Some people just are not going to expand their thinking.
It's a cultural thing, right? Culture. And what is culture formed of? Like you say that you're at like birth. We're all born with the same brain and the same central nervous system. We are not that different in the end. The thing that differentiates us is our beliefs and our cultures, and what's formed around that is the environment that we're in, the people around us. And if we get challenged by the people around us, or we put ourselves in a different environment, we'll challenge our own beliefs and start to change neurology and start to think in different ways and different patterns. So like I said, we don't have the time for that slow cultural shift. And yes, there's limited ability for agriculture to change that fast because they're so isolated. They're not exposed to, the people and the opportunities that you and I are. Like you and I are very, I would say, privileged in that sense to be exposed to all these different opportunities and different people and different ways of thinking. So we have the ability to think differently, whereas you don't have the ability to think that differently living on a cattle property for that long because you're not exposed to all these ideas and opportunities. It's found so beautiful about the carbon project developers and those companies and myself that had come out there. So we brought them that different way of thinking and that different way of communicating and ideas and opportunities. And what I think we need to get better at, myself included, is how we can expose them to different opportunities and integrate those models in a more effective way to be able to change, to be able to get more people more curious. Not about the person or they won't change, and they may not, people have to want to change. But also I think the other aspect of it now is coming back to that reaction. Do people change because they react? Is there something bigger in their lives or is it a slow cultural shift? We're going to react now because of climate change. It is getting harder. There are more droughts, fires, floods, bushfires, whatever. We are going to have to change. And you and I are the solution to that. We can know how these people work and their lifestyles, and we can bring them those opportunities to get curious, and we can provide them with the tools once they want to. And people aren't going to change, like you're right, they're not going to unless they want to. But we will be either forced to or they're going to want to. And I think you and I, people like that, will be here either way, right?
Yeah, we're always here. I've personally tried to give up many times and I don't. So I do feel that. What do you feel is some of the solutions that could be put forward that farmers would be open to for learning more? Because I know people always say you've got to go out there, but it's tremendously expensive to go and drive 3 hours out of town, put yourself up, organise everyone to come, do all this sort of thing. It's not viable. We've got all the internet, but they don't like looking at the internet. They like you to turn up in person. And I think there's there's got to be some other midway in all of that. Maybe it's the radio. They listen on the radio station. I don't know. I'm asking. I'm not in any way suggesting.
No, I think carbon project developers have run workshops, and I've run a couple myself. The resource groups, what they call it, the natural resource groups that are up in those areas, they put on things occasionally. You got to get curious about going to those days. I see like a lot of people going to those type of things. There is no.
They do go. The farmers go to them.
Come on, yeah. You get some good turn-ups. It's a social thing as well. I think carbon project developers should start putting on a few more once the industry picks up again with new methods, that kind of thing. But I don't feel there is any excuse anymore for anyone in this day and age to not have the access to information. We have YouTube, we have the internet, ChatGPT. There's everything available to us right now that never once was.
No, I realise that, but I'm asking, do farmers look at those things? Are they looking at them? I would agree, but I'm not a farmer, so I don't presume to know whether they do sit and look at them or whether they say, whenever I've had any conversation with farmers, they're like, I'm in the tractor, I can listen to something on the radio, I can't possibly look at something. I'm too tired when I come in.
That's what I mean. There's many different forms of mediums now, and people learn in different ways. I don't like listening to podcasts for a long period of time. I like reading. So there's every different form right now out there available to them.
Just so you know, I do a transcript for people to read. I put it on Apple Pod for people to just listen. I put it on video and on Spotify. So you've got all those mediums covered. It's a lot of work. I agree. Everyone's different. Sorry?
That's perfect. That's what I mean. There isn't an excuse anymore. If you're curious, if you want to change, there are so many different ways to be able to do that right now. And learning is the gift of life in the end. If we're not growing, if we're not learning, what we're dying. Everything in this universe grows in some way, form or another. Learning is a gift, and we should be able to use that and share that with other people, because once you start in this world, like yourself, regenerative agriculture is not just about the methods. It's not just about land regeneration. It's about community. It's about meeting like-minded people like yourself and having these conversations. And once you do, you feel that energy inside you and something shifts inside you to an expansion of your own world and your own mindset and the way that you think and feel and do. And you just get more and more excited about life in general. Like even right now, from the start when I started talking about this podcast to right now, like I'm just getting more into it, more fulfilled with my own life because we're generating all these ideas back and forth to each other. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. It's not just about land regeneration and talking about all this sort of boring environmental stuff all the time. It is about connection with people in the end.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful. That is one of the beautiful gifts that regen ag or that community or that way of thinking can give you.
So that brings us to the next big $64 question is, what do you think you want to do next? Where is the area of focus, you think, for yourself? What is the bit that you haven't explored enough that excites you?
Yeah, good question. I think specifically, I'm not too sure yet. The two things for me haven't changed: high impact, high profit. Those two things have to go together: high positive impacts and high profit. Scalability for climate change and agriculture in particular. I am talking with the couple of the Kiss the Ground Netflix directors to think about a documentary in Australia on these carbon projects. Conversation with them right this moment to see what we can do in Australia on that side as maybe a third sequel or a whole other series. Not too sure just yet. So I think that film is probably a big thing for me. I may look to renewable energy as well, dabble a little bit of that, and especially in marine now. I've done the whole land rehabilitation, regeneration thing. I am definitely interested in Great Barrier Reef, kelp farming, that kind of thing, the marine division. So I'll probably delve into something a little bit different so that my own mind can expand. Yeah, not that I have learned everything that there is to learn in land regeneration.
Would you like to actually run one of these projects yourself? Some of these other ideas, or are you more interested in overseeing other people running them?
Look, I'm probably the entrepreneur type. I've decided that the founder, build a company, flip it.
You're willing to go crying on the floor again?
Probably not as bad as what I did. No, I've got a few good connections now from doing this, and I'd probably partner with the right people and raise the money, and then go about it with less personal risk because I still suffered out of this.
Everybody does, don't worry.
Yeah.
I'm working on an energy project at the moment in the UAE. So we work with the company's called Ocean Merge, and we do a lot of stuff around, well, all manner of things. But you do have to get the money flowing first. It's very difficult to do it with nothing. I think I'm very impressed you got it going, doing your own funding to do the actual projects where you take the risk up front's massive. I don't think I'd go that far.
I don't think I'd do it again. Just in a different stage of my life, I'd like a relationship and a cattle station myself and build a house and that kind of thing. I'm in a different stage now, where I know what that is. I know what to take that type of risk is on, and now I would like to do it again, but with the right people, good people. Not that I didn't do it with the right people before, but just partner to begin with the right people to do the capital raising. And that's what I'm about in this next stage of my life, is working with good people that have the same intentions as me, like that high positive impact, high profit, and try and make a difference in maybe that social aspect as well. I think film can really help.
So are you interested in doing something just for Australia, or are you interested in doing something more global, or where's your sort of long-term goals? If you're wanting to have a farm, I imagine you're not wanting to move too far away from anywhere.
I've thought about, I have thought internationally now, expansion. I'm looking at expansion, scalability, anything. I don't know. I love Australia, and I don't see myself going anywhere too far from here. I love Tasmania.
That's a big change, Tasmania from Gold Coast.
It's probably the next best bet, to be honest. With climate change, everything's getting hotter.
Oh, it is getting warmer. That's true. We've had the warmest May ever. I'm in Melbourne, so it's been extraordinary. The farm is the water's almost gone completely out of the dam. So yeah, there is those correlatives.
Yeah. No, look, anything that's going to make a positive impact on the world, I'm interested in doing now. I really love film and theatre, so at some stage, with enough capital behind me, I'd like to start dabbling in that a little bit, see where I can go. But no, I'm still going to look at being a founder again at some stage.
Good on you. You haven't lost the zeal. This is good to know.
Not yet. I am anyway, but I just need to do a bit of recovery first. I'm going home to recover, replenish, and make sure I can, my intentions are set and right, and my headspace is good, and my heart's in the right place, because it's not all about money. I need to make sure that I'm doing the right thing for the world, and I need to be dedicated to it, because once you commit to something, you don't want to half-ass it. You want to go in the end. So
Totally. And is home with your family on cattle station somewhere?
No, we don't own it anymore, but I know the neighbouring guys still adjust the cattle on it, and etc. So I'm probably going to go home, jump on a horse, and muster the paddocks that I used to muster as a kid, over the next few weeks. So I'll do that now that I've sold the company and everything's settled. And I get back to nature in the end, reconnect, and jump on a horse and see where I land up.
Take a holiday on a horse.
Yes. Not that it will be a holiday. I'm sure they'll put me to work.
But maybe that's your form of a holiday.
I haven't done any physical work for a long time. Been sitting behind a computer desk. Hopefully these hands get a little bit more hardened up.
That's wonderful. Like, is there anything else you'd like to talk about? Anything you'd like to put the message out into the ether about that we haven't covered for you? Maybe if it's looking for a different opportunity or anything at all, because people will see things about you and maybe reach out along those lines.
No. I mean, we can do another episode sometime if anyone wants to discuss that real entrepreneurial journey and what it takes, mindset, psychological shift, as well as the actual business strategy. I mean, I've learned a lot off it, and I can definitely talk through the strategy of that at another time. But at the moment, no, I think this was a good general chat in terms of, carbon, what it means, what it sort of half takes to do something significant like that, and then next stage. I feel like we've gone through a roller coaster of emotions here. Happy to say, and that's what it is. That's what
it wouldn't be regenerative if it didn't have all of that.
That's right. I mean, yes, that exactly right. So regenerating, degenerating, it goes in the wavelength, and we're constantly doing that, and that's what the entrepreneurial journey and life in general is like. And you're just sort of managing those ups and downs. You need a good support network around you, and you need to keep on talking to like-minded people like yourself, I feel, so that it can fill up your cup and get that energy back flowing again. Yeah.
Resilience creates resilience inside you.
But resilience, but then reconnect to nature. Nature will heal you. And that's what Regen Ag in the end is all about, is reconnecting to nature, looking to nature for answers. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to practice what I preach over the next few weeks and jump on a horse and drink water out of a freshwater creek out rather than the taps on the Gold Coast or in a pool here. Jump in a dam, it's just that's what it's all about for me at the moment. So I think that we don't do enough of that as society, which is where a lot of all the mental health problems and everything stems from in the end. So, yeah, I think that we probably covered a lot of different topics, but if you ever wanted to delve into anything specifically that we've touched on, we can do a part 2 at some stage.
Wonderful. Well, it's been lovely talking to you, Khory. Have a wonderful week and get out there in that fresh air and enjoy the farms again.
Yeah, thank you very much, Samantha. And thank you for having me on and doing this, putting the word out there and doing what you're doing. It's fantastic, and it's a very positive way to impact the industry and the world around us.
Bye.